who are experiencing food insecurity. But let's take a peek at what poverty means, okay? So the federal poverty line, that used to be the cutoff for whether you'd receive welfare services. It isn't anymore, and I'll talk about why in a minute. But the poverty line now in 2021 for a family of 4 is $26,500. So if your income is $26,500 or lower, then you are living in poverty according to the federal government. Now, how does that relate to the minimum wage? Okay, so the minimum wage in the United States is $7.25 an hour. That's the federal minimum wage. So if you go to a 40-hour work week and 2 weeks of unpaid holidays, that gives you $14,500 as your annual gross income. Just sit with that for a moment. The minimum wage, the federal minimum wage in this country, will put you about halfway up to the poverty line, halfway up to the poverty line, if you have a single income in your household. So the federal minimum wage is grotesquely inadequate to support a household. If you work a single minimum wage job, and many minimum wage jobs are structured so that you can't take a second job. Like if you're working for Walmart, you have to keep your week clear so that Walmart can schedule you whenever they want to schedule you, and they don't tell you until the week, the beginning of the week, what your schedule is going to be. So you can't organize 2 minimum wage jobs to work together because the structure of the job is keeping you down to 1. And in case you're thinking that the only people who work minimum wage jobs are high school students who are earning spending money and living in their parents' homes, in 2019, which is the last year for which we have data, 41% of minimum wage workers were 25 years old or older. 25 years or older, so they're long past college age, right? And at 41%, 4 out of every 10 minimum wage workers are past college age. New Jersey's minimum wage just went up to $12 an hour, which is great, right? Except that even that doesn't bring the income up to the federal poverty level. So let's look at minimum wage over time. The blue line, the bottom line, that's minimum wage in dollars. So out over time, what we see is that the minimum wage is going up, which is what you would expect. The original minimum wage in 1938 was 25 cents an hour. And it's been gradually increasing. But you see long stretches where it's flat. That means that the minimum wage isn't increasing for many years. And we're in one of those flat spaces right now. This is, again, the federal minimum wage. The orange line here is if you adjust it to 2021 inflation-adjusted dollars. Okay, so the orange line is if you looked at the spending power of the money and kept that spending power consistent, what was the real purchasing power of the minimum wage? And what we see there is that minimum wage increased dramatically into 1968, where it peaked. That was the best minimum wage we had in the United States, was in 1968. And since then, it's been erratically declining ever since then. And, even the $12 an hour we have in New Jersey now doesn't meet the 1968 standard in terms of its purchasing power. And when we look at the calculation of the federal poverty rate, it's based on an assumption that we spend about 1/3 of our income on housing and about another 1/3 of our income on food. And if you don't have enough money to meet basic, living needs, you're officially below the poverty line. But people really wind up spending much, much more of their income on housing. And a family nowadays often spends half their income or more on housing. And the average percentage people spend on food is only 16%. That's the average in the United States in 2021. So for context, 16% of the federal poverty line, 16% of the federal poverty line is $4,240, which amounts to $81 a week or $11.64 a day. Can you imagine feeding a family of 4 on $11.64 a day? And that is, by the way, why things like welfare benefits and supplemental nutrition programs are not tied to the poverty line anymore. You don't have to be at the poverty line to receive those services because the federal support programs and the state support programs recognize that the federal poverty level is just beyond ridiculous at this point. So you can get double the federal poverty line and still qualify for certain benefits. But there are other pressures on the very poor. If you live in certain areas, you may be in a food desert. And what that means is that there's no place to buy reasonably priced healthy food in your area. You might, for example, be unable to purchase fresh vegetables in your neighborhood. And if you're homeless or if you live in a motel, you may not have access to a kitchen. And so you aren't able to cook food, and you may not have a fridge to store milk, for example. Try feeding a family of 4 when you have to eat out 3 meals a day for $11.64. It's a lot. So where does that leave us as an institution and as individuals in terms of our response to the twin problems of poverty and food insecurity? It basically comes down to justice and mercy. Thomas Aquinas said that mercy without justice is the mother of dissolution, and justice without mercy is cruelty. I remember hearing a sermon at one of the UCC General Synod meetings many years ago, and the preacher reframed Thomas Aquinas in these words: "Mercy without justice is just pity, and justice without mercy is just plain cruel." Mercy without justice is just pity, and justice without mercy is just plain cruel. Her point is that we need both of them. We need mercy and we need justice. I love this bumper sticker, right? I think we have a banner that we can hang out in front of the church and do every once in a while. I love this. It's on all of our cars. I gave it to the kids. They put them on their cars. They're obedient children. It's great. So this is what the UCC is all about. And here is the mercy in this message, right? Care for the poor, share your resources. And here is the justice: fight for the powerless. So the call of the UCC is to embrace both the missions of mercy and the mission of justice. So here are some strategies that you can use. We'll do justice first, because there's no point in my standing up here and telling you there's a problem if I'm not going to stand up here and say, okay, what can we do about it, right? That's just irritating. So I thought of some things, and I asked my favorite political scientist for some more ideas, and here are some things. So justice first. Justice is the harder one for this congregation. I have been known to say that this is a pity congregation, that we're really good at mercy, but we're not really so great at justice, and that's for good reason. Justice is hard, because when you're trying to achieve justice, you're trying to shift an ocean liner, and you may feel like your efforts are useless, that it's just your little effort is not going to have any effect. But you have to think about it as erosion. Right? Drops of water on a stone. That's what made the Grand Canyon. Right? Literally, drops of water on a stone is what carved the Grand Canyon. And if you have enough drops of water all at the same time, then you've got a fire hose. And that can have some effect as well. So here are some things. First, political advocacy needs to be targeted in the right direction. So you need to know which level of the government is responsible for which pieces of this food insecurity puzzle. So I got a few suggestions here. So places or reasons that you can write your congressmen and senators at the federal level, at the state level, and at your local town level. And if you need a sample letter, I'd be happy to draft one for you. If you're a new advocate to political advocacy. But there are also organizations that do lobbying as well, including the United Church of Christ. So the United Church of Christ does lobby in Washington. I have a couple of other organizations listed here. The UCC participates in ecumenical advocacy days in Washington. Would you like to tell us about that, William? He went once.
So ecumenical advocacy days happens every April. It's about 4 days where the mainline churches gather in Washington and meet with members of the House and the Senate to advocate for various social justice changes. This year, the gathering was virtual because of the pandemic. They were worried about global justice and environmental change. They were advocating to change the U.S. policies to influence the world to become more supportive of poor people around the world. In the past, they've done stuff here on housing, they've done things on food, on anti-welfare programs, those sorts of, or anti-poverty programs, those sorts of things. And various churches organize trips to DC in that April period and spend a day or 2 days talking to their members of Congress. And because it's a national activity, they know we're coming. And so they are ready to hear what we have to say, we, the mainline churches. So it's something that we've never done. I did it once as part of Rutgers Protestant Campus Ministry back in 2010 or thereabouts. It's big, and it has an effect. People like our member of Congress here, Christopher Smith, they do listen when we go down and talk.
And you can investigate the platform of your elected officials when you're looking at an election coming up. Find out what their positions are and if they don't state a position, ask them what their position is on issues that you're concerned about, and vote your conscience. So these are a few ideas, but maybe you have other suggestions. Anybody have other ideas on the justice end? We'll get to the mercy. Mercy is easier. We'll go longer on mercy. Any other thoughts on this? He always has one. It's great.
He never stops talking. So the reason the slide has the Fair Housing Center up there and other housing things is because, as Dr. Fields said, a lot of the issue has to do with access to housing. And New Jersey is extremely expensive to live in. I just finished reading a book called Nickel and Dimed, which I pulled off the shelf downstairs next door, thanks to Terry Michaud's library down there. It's about trying to live on minimum wage job. The woman, Barbara Ehrenreich, who's a PhD holding writer, gave up her life to spend a few months trying to live on minimum wage jobs around the country. And she found that the hardest thing is to find a place to live. A place to live that has a kitchen, that has the way to get by. New Jersey is very, very expensive for housing, as you all know, and for many of the clients who work with our food pantries or work through them, they don't have access to good cooking spaces. So we can give them things, but they can't do anything with them. And so advocating your town, your county, and your state for more affordable housing is probably one of the most effective ways to try to address this problem of poverty.
Betty.
This also causes people to be homeless.
Yes, and Betty's point is that the high cost of living also causes people to be homeless, which leads to all kinds of problems, because then everybody, if you're homeless, then by definition you have no kitchen, so you are not able to prepare your own food. So then it just exacerbates the problem. Liz Mueller.
Hi there. Sue, thank you so much for this presentation. I'm just going to cheat a bit. I love your metaphor of the dripping water and the Grand Canyon, because obviously, you know, it's scientifically correct, but it was also hundreds of thousands of years. And a lot of us are impatient. And I think, though, this idea of strength in numbers is important. And I think the more we can build coalitions, for example, the one that William talked about, you know, the more powerful we become. And this is a bit of a plug for something our church may be getting involved in the fall. There's a Episcopal priest who is organizing a group which is called Monmouth Together. And the goal is to form a coalition of faith-based and nonprofit organizations to determine specifically what the needs are locally, not nationally, not internationally, but locally, and then to figure out strategies for advocating for change. I want everybody to stay tuned. Monmouth Together is what
So I'm going to repeat what you're saying for the benefit of folks who are online. So Liz is telling us about an upcoming opportunity to participate in Monmouth Together, which is run by a local Episcopal priest, which is an ecumenical group working to combine people's individual drops of water, as it were, into that fire hose that I spoke of. We're trying to make the multiple voices stronger than each individual person. So how about, oh, there's another, Kathy Bauer.
Yeah, it just occurred to me, I was a member of a church previously
Mhm.
that had a committee of like 3 people who were assigned one family who was on the verge of being homeless. We had 3 families we dealt with, but only 3 people per working with a family who was about to be homeless. And it was extremely effective.
So what Kathy is saying, for the benefit of people listening, is in a previous church there was a committee which was working individually with a small number of families who were struggling with poverty and the threat of homelessness, and that this was very effective, having a mentoring role with the church members and supportive. I think that is a good transition into our next topic, which is what we do for Mercy. Did you have something, Regina?
I have concerns about the Fair Housing Center.
Okay.
They're winning all kinds of lawsuits.
Ah,
Affordable housing in the towns here, which is a good thing. But when we advocate it to our local municipalities, we have to be very careful, because they're putting this affordable housing in all kinds of crazy places.
yes. So what?
Ways that are detrimental to the environment and other things. So we have to be careful when we ask them for the affordable housing.
What Regina is remarking is that the problem of creating affordable housing is very complicated. When you ask a town to put affordable housing in, they may do so in ways that are environmentally insensitive, or where the housing is not really adequate for one reason or another. So it is not a simple problem. This is a very, very complex issue. But let's look at Mercy. Lewis.
Do you know what the federal minimum wage rate would have to be to equate to the 68 purchasing power? What would it have to be today?
Well, it would have to be about $14 and change.
So Bernie Sanders was right when he said 15.
When Bernie Sanders said that we should make our minimum wage $15, he was rounding up from 1968. Yeah, that didn't come from nowhere. So let's look at mercy. So mercy is easier. It's easier for an individual person to help another individual person or group in the short term. It's long-term societal changes is turning the ocean liner. It's a bigger problem, but it's important to do both. I mean, we can't just not help people because that's not turning the ocean liner. No, we need to help people now while they're struggling, and then we can, and simultaneously be working on effecting societal change. So here are some ideas. The first is tip generously, tip extravagantly, and tip in cash, especially if you're not sure that the management is going to hand over that tip that you put on your credit card. Because, folks, the minimum wage for a server in a restaurant is $2.13 an hour. $2.13 an hour because they get tips, right? And so servers in restaurants, the cleaner in your hotel, taxi drivers, the people who deliver your food to you, the tip jar at Starbucks, be generous. My parents, I'm digressing for a moment, during the pandemic, my parents used Instacart so that they would not have to go to the grocery store. My sister arranged it. She was staying with my parents by accident when the pandemic broke, and she just stayed. So there she is, and she's doing Instacart, and she's putting $50 tips on the deliveries because my parents could afford it. And she said, these people are literally being asked to risk their lives so that my parents don't have to go to the grocery store. And so they actually got themselves a volunteer personal shopper this way as well. It was excellent. But the next 3 strategies on my list come down to a single principle, and that is try to give your business to organizations where the money goes to workers rather than to the corporate overlords. Some strategies for this include shopping small, so small businesses, local businesses, shop local, and shop in person where you can. But just a little digression, do you know that Walmart's onboarding process for a new employee sometimes includes instructions for how to apply for welfare benefits? So the Walmart company is literally using tax dollars as part of their pay strategy, right? I just can't. So if you have a choice, go for ethical companies that pay a living wage. Costco, rather than Walmart. Costco is an excellent employer with excellent wages and benefits. Wegmans, rather than Whole Foods, which is now owned by Amazon. You think of Whole Foods as being earthy, crunchy, vegetarian place, so they must be good employers. They used to be excellent employers. But I understand from speaking to people in Whole Foods that things have gone down the tubes since it was taken over by Amazon. There are a whole lot of organizations, both locally and globally, that work to address people's need for housing and food. And I have just a few of them listed here. We support the Calico Cat Food Pantry and Thrift Shop, and many others, the Bayshore Lunch Break. Our church always participates in the crop walk. So everyone can use helping hands. But if you don't have time to help, everyone can also use your money. So these are places where you can assist people by just sending a few dollars their way. And of course, we are currently running a food drive in this church. So we did one in March, and we got an astonishing amount of food, just an unholy amount of food. Is it an unholy amount? No, it was a holy amount of food. We got a holy amount of food, and we want to get a holy moly amount of food this month, right? So we can outdo our March contributions. This is actually a picture from the March food drive. It was only about midway through. We actually got a lot more than that, but there's already a nice pile of stash in the fellowship hall, and we want to outstrip our performance. But I'm sure you have other ideas. I think we need a microphone to run around so I don't have to repeat what everybody is saying. Can you do that, William? Thank you. So, Liz Mueller.
I have two, wow, that's loud. I have two suggestions. The first, I wanted everybody to be aware of the fact that all of Tim McClune's restaurants are working now with a policy where every worker gets $15 an hour. So he is, if it's a server making $2 or $3 an hour, they are making up the difference, and they are guaranteeing that every employee in a Tim McClune's restaurant makes $15 an hour. And for those of you who may be new to the area, I don't know, is it 8 or 9? He's got quite a few restaurants, including one in Seabright, one in Long Branch, one in Red Bank, Shrewsbury, Asbury Park. Anyway, he's a great guy, a great local leader, and this is terrific. And the second plug I'd like to make is for No Limits Cafe. No Limits Cafe is an organization that we have supported with our turkey dinner a number of years, and as you all probably know, No Limits is providing, I believe it's $15 an hour, Sue, I can't remember the exact amount of money, but they are paying people with intellectual disabilities more than what minimum wage, no matter what they're doing. And they're, so it's a wonderful, wonderful organization from the point of view of offering employment to a group that typically has very, very difficult time getting jobs. And the food is fabulous. They're on Route 35 in Middletown. So those are my two suggestions. We do have a choice about where we shop and where we dine.
Yeah, and the bit about making up people's wages, there's a rule. If you're paying your servers $2.13 an hour, but let's say it's a pancake house. I worked in a pancake house for one terrible summer, and the most expensive meal was $5. Now that just points to the fact that I'm very old, but that meant that I got very small tips. And if you don't make $7.25 an hour between your $2.13 and your lousy tips, the restaurant is supposed to make up the difference. But in practice, they don't. They don't make up the difference. So you just are working for less than minimum wage. Go ahead, Karen.
I have a question for you, because I know this is really new, but with the children getting a benefit from the government every month, the family is getting a benefit, how do you think, what is it doing to the food insecurity? I know they're saying that they're trying to combat childhood poverty.
Right. So I'll leave that one to William.
Yeah, I figured that'd be mine to answer. So the comment was $300 per child, I believe, per month, which is an expansion of an existing program, the Earned Income Tax Credit, which is a program started under President Reagan in the early 1980s, which at the end of the year, if you were working and you didn't make enough money, they'd give you an expanded tax rebate, which was nice. We benefited from it ourselves one year. But it comes at the end of the year, a bit too late to survive the year. This is a one-year trial program to move that money into the year. And it's supposed to reduce poverty by 40% among families with children. If it becomes long-term, it will be fantastic for those families.
Has it started yet?
It has. The first checks went out 3 weeks ago. They did go out. We have no idea how well it's going to work. But I should comment that it does say children. We care about children. Almost all of our anti-poverty programs are aimed at children. They are not aimed at adults without children. So if your children have grown up, you don't have access to some of those. There are some, and Betty's objecting already. I'll get to you, Betty, in a moment. But yes, the quick answer is, if this becomes long-term, it would help enormously. But think about it, $300 a month per kid is not going to get you where you can rent a place to live in Monmouth County. So it's going to help, but not do everything.
My question is, is that something that you believe from your experience and knowledge that we should advocate for with our politicians?
Yes, did I say yes? Yes, did I say yes? I think I said yes. I think I said yes, yes.
Yes. So and the assertion that it will cut child poverty cut poverty by 40%, it's remarkable, isn't it, that you can give $300 to everyone every month, and that only cuts poverty by 40%. That means that the problem is very large, right?
I just wanted to make a point. Before the pandemic, at the soup kitchen, the Bayshore Lunch Program, we had, and very regularly, we had a lot of senior citizens. And many of them were spending almost the entire Social Security check on housing and their medication, which left them with zero money for food.
Yeah.
And that's why they came each day to eat.
Yes. The problem of the cost of housing is sort of just exacerbates all of the problems of poverty. Yeah, Bob.
Yes, I would caution you not to rely on government to solve all your problems. The effect of government on a soup kitchen, I'll give you some examples. One is the county has restrictions on soup kitchens. Well, of course, we want to be healthy. We don't want to spread disease and whatever. But at the soup kitchen at one time, we used to have churches. Ours was one, and there were others, where typically the families would make meatloaf and bring that. And that's illegal. You can't do that anymore. We had several churches that were doing things like that and making the food at home and bringing it. And that's illegal because the county health department can't monitor your individual kitchens. Is this helpful? Is this saving hungry people from their destinations? No. Another example would be when there's a disaster like Sandy, FEMA comes in and they have food and they serve people and they push the soup kitchens and pantries aside, and a week later they're gone. This is akin to do-gooders that serve Thanksgiving dinner to hundreds and hundreds of people, and they get their names in the newspaper, and that's wonderful. And the other 364 days of the year, it's places like the Bayshore Lunch Program that feed those people. So the government is helpful, and I'd like to think they have the power to really do good, and so be careful who you vote for. But I caution you not to rely on the government to solve all your problems.
Justice and mercy, both.
Yes.
We need to do, and we can't rely on other people to do all of our mercy for us.
The bottom line is food drives like we're having here at the church, that's what you need to work on. That gets the food to the Calico Cat and the pantries and the soup kitchens. That's what we need to do.
It is certainly the case that governments make stupid ideas, but as it happens, they've just changed the rule in New Jersey where people can make cookies now for sale. So the rules do get changed sometimes.
Thank you. I have a few comments. I hope I remember all of them. The first is the book Nickel and Dimed, which I actually left in the library. I'm glad you read it. is excellent. I recommend it to everyone. There's also the book called Nomadland, which was a movie, I think last year, won an Academy Award, about how people in this country cannot afford housing and are living in old RVs and their cars to survive. Another one, I think is down there. I think I dropped it off. Also, I spoke to a server a few months ago, I guess it was, and asked about tips, tips that we leave on credit cards. And I won't name the restaurant, it's one local, and they said the owners take 10% of their tips if they put on a credit card. So that really is the difference between leaving a tip in by charge and a tip in cash. And the last thing is just a question. The letter writing campaigns, writing to your congressman is wonderful. Unfortunately, I'm focused on other things. Would it be possible for the Food Insecurity Committee to have letter writing campaigns? I'd love to sign 1 million letters. I just don't have time to do the research and actually write my own letters at this point.
We will look.
It's on the agenda for tomorrow.
Ah, okay, so there's your answer. That's an easy lift. So, other thoughts, other questions, other ideas?
Let me jump in. Matt, have the microphone back?
Yes, you're still on.
I'm on, okay. So one of the things that has happened over the last 50 years or so in this country is that we have moved dramatically into a major service economy with fast food, fast
William,
casual food.
Go back behind your thing and take your mask off.
Right. Unmask yourself, she says. In the last 50 years or so, we've gone into a massive, massive service economy for many, many reasons. Food service, fast food, fast casual food, prepared food from the grocery store, dining out. For many reasons, we have moved enormously into an economy which relies on cheap, cheap, cheap labor. Our food actually has not increased very much in price since the 1960s and 1970s because we've gotten faster and more efficient at making and processing meat and grains. But in doing so, we have really squeezed the entire supply line so that we, the consumers, can benefit. It's been a fabulous reality for us to be able to buy our chicken, to be able to go out and get food for cheap. But the consequence has been pushing and pushing a larger and larger, very, very low-wage labor force. Many of the people who we serve through Calico Cat or who you served or served at the Bayshore program were working families trying to make ends meet but unable to get to a job which paid enough for them to actually get on their feet and to move forward. So these are our decisions as individuals over the last 50 years, individual consumers. We get busier and busier, we hire lawn care, we get busier, we go and buy the rotisserie chicken from wherever, we get busier and busier, and we demand more and more services from people who we don't even see, who we have to exploit to make it affordable for us. And so
a member of our congregation, Eric Case, imports chocolate. If you didn't know that about Eric, you definitely need to meet Eric. He's awesome, and so is his chocolate. But he once said to me something that really stuck with me. He said, if you pay less than $10 a pound for chocolate, somebody in the supply chain doesn't eat. The chocolate manufacturing process is deeply exploitative of the people who are actually growing and producing the cocoa that gets processed and made into chocolate. And I took a big gulp and said, okay, so now I buy $10 a pound chocolate so that somebody down the food chain gets to eat. So there are decisions that we can make.
I had one comment from the
peanut
the
gallery,
peanut gallery
up above,
in the
yes.
peanut balcony. When you mention food deserts, one of the things that has always bothered me is one thing you find consistently in food deserts is bad food. Mm-hmm. McDonald's, Burger King, Taco Bell, Wendy's. It's cheap, mass-produced, and extremely unhealthy. years ago when Maddie was just first born, so about 17 years ago, I read the book Fast Food Nation, and just saw the amount of disparity that goes on in urban centers where there's no fresh food, there's no fresh fruit, and yet there are fast food places that offer cheap options. When you mentioned the $11.18, that maybe you could feed a family of 3 on very, very unhealthy food, which leads to poor general health, diabetes, and lack of those nutritional values that you would be getting from those kinds of foods. And the moment I closed the book, after I finished reading, that was the last time I had fast food.
Well, I
It's
tell
about
you,
choices.
the United States are eating more and more vegetables than they used to. That's great, right? Except that the vegetables they're eating are potatoes in the form of French fries. The average American eats something like 8 foods. And eating vegetables. And the pricing of food drives that. If you go into the grocery store and you go to the fresh fruits and vegetables area, apples cost more than chicken. And that doesn't make sense from an environmental point of view. The environmental damage that's done by a chicken as opposed to an apple is enormous. And the health benefits of a vegetable diet are in many cases much better than a meat diet, but unhealthy food in the grocery store is cheaper, as well as you said, fast food. So there are a lot of societal problems, and then you go to the movie Super Size Me, right, where the gentleman ate out at McDonald's 3 meals a day, and if he was asked if he wanted his meal supersized, he said yes. That was his rule, and he had to stop because in 30 days he was dying he was so ill he had to abort the program before he'd finished the period. It might have been more than a month. I don't remember exactly, but the portion sizes now versus when I was a little girl, a bagel when I was a little girl was 3 inches across. Think of how big a bagel is now. It's 2 to 3 times the size, and that's a single serving. So we have lots of problems that lead to health problems and diabetes and I could go on for a while, but I'll stop. Any other last thoughts? The church is very invested in helping people in the short term, as Bob is saying. We're also very invested in trying what we can do to affect societal change. So you will be hearing from the Social Justice Task Force as our church starts initiatives to try to change our society. Well, thank you very much for your attention. I would curtsy, but I would fall off my ladder. So.